The Earth is home to over 7 billion people and is growing 212,000 people a day. With an ever-growing population expecting to exceed 9 billion people by 2050 and currently over 1 billion people undernourished and underfed, we are approaching the edge of a food security cliff. According to a BBC News article, the number of malnourished people has dropped by 19% since the mid-1900s. However, it is predicted that this progress will not continue to drop because of increasing constraints on food security, such as water availability, building concerns on pesticide-resistant bacteria, and lack of agricultural land space due to soil erosion. Despite today's efforts to manage world hunger, genetically modified organisms, GMOs, might possibly hold the key for creating a more sustainable tomorrow. In contrary, as stated by your organization, the Non-GMO Project, the production of GMOs hasn't been deemed safe, or unsafe for that matter, for public consumption. The current oppositional public discourse of GMO debate revolves around the consumption of GE foods to be the root cause of adverse health effects. A lot of this public scrutiny over GMOs serving as a precursor for health risks is because of the controversial research Professor Gilles Eric Seralini presented in 2012, titled Long-Term Toxicity of a Roundup Herbicide in a Roundup-Tolerant Genetically Modified Maize. Seralini, a professor of molecular biology at Caen University in France and appointed member of 2 governmental committees in Europe that manages and risk assess GMO production, proposes research into the long-term health effects of Roundup-resistant maize on rats in a 2-year study. The results he presented are baffling and quite revealing. According to Seralini, the consumption of GM maize induced tumor growth in both male and female rats. This published article presented hard data that the public found affirming, and on the other side put some scientists in an uproar. Regardless of the legitimacy and accuracy of Seralini's research, he and his team have effectively brought new light to the argument and also sought the question, do GM foods have adverse health effects associated with consumption? Indeed, however, it would be unethical and inhumane to run any long-term experimental research on any individual, but this question shouldn't be asked at the individual level. Rather, it should be addressed at the political level. The current U.S. food policy isn't governing safety regulation or the labeling of said genetically engineered foods. According to Chris Wozniak, Regulation of Agricultural Biotechnology, titled Regulation of Genetically Modified Crops in the U.S. and Canada, American Overview, the U.S. food policy governing GMO biofortification is very minuscule compared to the European Union, the EU. Wozniak, after receiving his PhD in plant protein synthesis from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, worked in the Agricultural Research Service Department for the United States Department of Agriculture and went on to work for the Environmental Protection Agency as a biologist. States that the U.S. currently has no bureaucratic branch that oversees the safety or the regulation of GMOs. Incongruent, it also states that GMOs are the same nutritionally as their non-GMO counterpart, thus there is no governmental agency needed for the production and labeling of GMOs. This in turn sheds public concern both over the perceived health risks and over the regulatory processes involved in distributing and monitoring the GMOs commercially. This puts a huge implication and sense of responsibility on you, the Non-GMO Project, to be the voice of public concern. It is not too difficult to understand why one would be so inclined to reject the idea of bioingenuity in genetically engineered crops. Other countries, such as Europe, have strict mandatory protocol and standards that have made the distribution and production of GMOs very tedious. On your website, you guys specifically referred to the EU as a possible step to moving away from the GMO products. In the EU, the system has adopted a no-tolerance policy when it comes to GE food. The current food policy in the EU is that if any food contains over 0.9% of GMO in product, then the food must be labeled as such. Furthermore, as established above, GMOs aren't necessarily deemed safe for consumption, which also favors further expulsion of GE crops from distribution. It is also almost inconceivable to argue that GMOs are a safe food crop for consumption. Certainly, the arguments are mostly in favor of GMO food labeling, the GMO retraction from distribution, and further regression back to traditional root labor-intensive agriculture. These arguments are so strong that it becomes very difficult to imagine any other alternative position. However, there is another position on the matter that is just as passionate as your response. As unlikely as it may seem, there is a debate about the effectiveness and the usefulness of GMOs in today's society. Many scientists who have been part of the pioneering involved in biotechnology or have partaken in this research understand the practical nature in today's GMOs. According to Paul Christo's article, Nutritionally Enhanced Crops and Food Security, Scientific Achievements versus Political Expediency, genetic engineering is one of the many forefronts for managing malnutrition. Christo, a research professor at the University of Yale, Spain, and PhD in plant biochemistry, goes into the ingenuity of GE and talks about how GE is currently working with crops to increase crop yields. Another interesting asset to his piece is how GE is working on providing missing nutrients not provided by traditional crossbreeding. This idea of adding new and missing nutrients to a staple crop not only increases the crop's nutrient density, requiring the coupling of less food in order to meet micronutrient demand, but it also can enhance food production, which can be utilized to address malnutrition. Malnutrition is a global socioeconomic problem due to the combined effects of regions' limited access to food, poverty in that region, and limited food distribution systems. According to the WHO, the World Health Organization, vitamin A deficiency is the leading cause of blindness in children and increases the risk of disease and death from severe infections. It is estimated that each year 250,000 to 500,000 children become blind and die within 12 months after due to vitamin A deficiency. WHO also found that vitamin A deficiency causes night blindness in pregnant women and could increase the risk of mortality. GE foods are a simple solution to this epidemic, and many others like it affecting these poverty-stricken areas. According to an article entitled The Contribution of Transgenic Plants to Better Health Through Improved Nutrition, Opportunities and Constraints, GE foods can be enriched with essential nutrients that our body cannot produce, does not produce enough of, and aids in the needs for proper functionality. Such nutrients include essential amino acids, vitamin A, required for the production of rhodopsin, essential for sight, vitamin C, an antioxidant which a deficiency would cause scurvy, vitamin B9, also known as folate, which is essential for pregnant women for proper fetal development, vitamin E, which are antioxidants that protect fatty acids from oxidative stress, and mineral nutrients. With these enriched foods, diseases caused by micronutrient deficiencies could be eradicated. Steps toward genetically modifying food for this reason have begun to take place. An organization called the Golden Rice Project has genetically engineered rice to contain most of these micronutrients lacking in the staple diet of poverty-stricken areas. This rice has been distributed to these areas and is credited with saving lives. This is just one simple example of how GE foods can help solve this food crisis affecting the world. The other side to GE foods being needed in today's modern society is not only can they increase the micronutrient content of food, but they can also increase the production of food by increasing the resilience of crops in the harsh environments and alleviating environmental impacts caused by agricultural production. According to a 2006 Cornell University report, Soil Erosion is an Upcoming Pandemic. The report stated, the United States is losing soil 10 times faster, and China and India are losing soil 30 to 40 times faster than the natural replenishment rate. Its problem with soil erosion only concentrates the ever-growing problem of malnutrition and world hunger. However, GMOs offer a solution to this problem. According to James Beaver in Juan Orsno's article published in 2009 July issue of Phytica, an international journal of plant breeding, conventional breeding offers a sustainable approach to alleviating soil erosion and permits plant adaptability to the skittish growing environments and climate conditions. Dr. James S. Beaver, a professor of plant breeding and genetics at the University of Puerto Rico, states that using conventional plant breeding has broadened the susceptibility and adaptability in common bean production. Conventional breeding, also known as gene splicing, in common bean breeding has been useful in addressing soil acidity, root rot associated with topsoil erosion, and deviating from the severe implications associated with climate changes, particularly in increasing and decreasing temperature environments. In the article is cited that the overexpression of malate dehydrogenase in transgenic alfalfa resulted in an enhanced exudation of organic acids in root tips. This means that the transgenic alfalfa has enhanced tolerances to aluminum and manganese, which inhibit plant cultivation. Another example of conventional breeding is the transgenic kidney beans that are reported to be permissive in high salt soils and in drought circumstances. These methods and others established in the article can be harnessed and used to address current problems associated with soil erosion and climate change. The overarching problem associated with this side on the GMO discourse is a question of whether or not the beneficial components of the GMO production and distribution surpass the perceived problems mentioned above. This is where you, the non-GMO project, become particularly needed. We need to address all facets of this argument and form lobbies to assess the political realm involved with GE. We need to push for a more sustainable tomorrow that addresses these bigger issues of world hunger and malnutrition, and also the more immediate problems with health implications involved in GMO consumption. We need to lobby for a governmental agency separate from the FDA and the USDA, like in the EU, that can manage and hold the production of GMOs to a higher standard of policy. And most importantly, we need to get to the bottom line about the perceived health effects associated with GMO consumption. We need to form and aid further research into the long-term health effects associated with that consumption. Getting aboard this plan and coming to a mutual beneficial decision at the political scene and individual level will benefit every party, and maybe we can eradicate malnutrition and world hunger. As Charlie Chaplin put in his great dictator speech, let us fight for a world of reason, a world where science and progress will lead to all men's happiness.